In the previous lesson, we saw how we can work with different panels in Octane for Blender, or actually the Blender Octane version. And we worked with the environment so far. So we worked with the, let's say, the first type of lining that we have here. And you can see that with just the environment, we can obtain some really interesting, realistic, beautiful effects. Now, this was an exterior scene that we set up using a model from Sketchfab. We also saw the Octane viewport and how to open it from the render settings at the right. And we're gonna later on in the course go into more details with these tools. Now, in this video, I want to show you some extra important and basic fundamental initial settings and tools and features of Octane for Blender. And we're gonna work again with the nodes editor. We're gonna work right here with the world editor in the shader editor, and we're gonna work in combination also with the first light, with the first Octane light that we're gonna use. So here we can work with the environment, and that's gonna be like your first type of lighting essentially. And using the light, by adding a light, we can work with the other type of lighting, which is based on lights. And actually we can also work with the emissive materials. So we're gonna see all these different types of lighting, but the main two are the environment and the area light that we're gonna see in this video. So I'm gonna go to file here, and I'm gonna go back to a previous lesson. I'm gonna restart from lesson 1 because I want to show you all the steps, how to create a light and how to create like a different scenario. So in the previous video we work more on an outdoor scenario, on an exterior scene. In here I want to create like more like an interior scene, so using simple objects and like if we are in a room. So if I delete here on the environment, if I delete the nodes of the daylight and the sun position, so to switch from exterior to interior, now we can go back to the world properties on the right side panel, and we can click again to apply a texture. Now in this case, applying a texture means that we are applying a simple color, and later on we will see also some more advanced effects that we can obtain with the environment, the HRI, the IBL, which means image-based lighting. But right now we want to concentrate more on the basic features, the basic tools for lighting. We're going to explore more complex things later on in the course. So right now I am lighting up my scene using just a single light, which is an environmental light, and it's a white light. So when we use environment light, we don't have like really specific shadows, really sharpened shadows. We have like this kind of ambient occlusion effect, kind of really generic shadows. So we can either work again with the Octane environment, as you just saw for the lighting, or we can work with the light. So by deleting the environment, you're gonna create a total black scene like it is in right now. We can only see the grid there on the render window and other like heads-up display. Now we're gonna go to adds, and we're gonna add a light. Now we're gonna go for the area light. This is the one that we can use with Blender and Octane. So let's start to move things around, and let's create our scene little by little. So right now the area light is just on top of my monkey head, but I don't see it. So what's the issue right here? Well, we didn't tell Octane that this is an Octane light yet. So we can move it, we can rotate it, we can scale it, we can do whatever we want. But right now we are not yet using this light in Octane. So also you can use the not the global coordinates, but the local if you want to scale it a little bit. So changing the size of the light is going to affect the way that light is going to illuminate your scene, but we're going to talk about this later on in other lessons. Right now, we just want to set up everything. So we saw how we can set up the environment. We saw how we can set up materials. We saw how we can set up the basic for the Octane render. Now let's see how we can set up the light. Well, actually it's really simple. You go into the light panel on the right side again. So you select the little green light icon at the on the list, and then make sure you are in the area and just click now in the use nodes button. So if you click on the use nodes button, there you go. There's the Octane light right here. So it automatically generated these nodes, which looks similar to what we saw for the material. So everything here works in nodes. Now in other software like 3D Studio Max, you will still have the environment panel and you have the material panels, and also in Cinema 4D, same thing. So you just need to figure out where these things are. So whatever you learn here, you can also apply it in 3ds Max or Cinema 4D. So you can see now if I rotate my light, if I scale my light, if I move my light, I'm gonna see the effects real time, because Octane is a real time rendering and it's also ray tracing, so it's pretty accurate. And this is really interesting and useful and user friendly, because we can actually see what's going on in our scene before we increase the render settings and the quality. So we can play around with lights, and especially with this node right here, which is the texture emission node, where we can change the color and the intensity or the power. So by changing this, you can see now we are affecting the way the scene is has been lighted. So when we work with just one single source of lighting, that's going to be like overriding everything else, overriding the materials, the objects, and everything else. So when we start to work with combination of lights, that's when we're going to get most the more interesting effects, the most beautiful effect. So we can definitely work with a combination of an area light, which is actually a light that it's also producing shadows, really visible shadows and sharpened shadows. But we can work with in combination with environment. So we can work with the two main source of lighting in combination to create more interesting effects, and so that not everything will be like washed out with that color of with that particular light. So by combining different colors, different lights, you're gonna obtain more interesting effects, and we're gonna talk again more about that later on. Now I want to show you some other panels here that are interesting. We saw the object properties, we saw that we have some extra Octane settings, but also if we select the little triangle there, which means the polygon or the mesh that we are working with, which is in this case the cube. And you can see that also in these meshes objects, we also have here some Octane properties. So for example, we can change clockwise or counterclockwise. This is going to affect the normals. So the the faces of the structure of our mesh. But this is just to explain to you that we can also affect our scene, our 3D objects and our scene using this model, using these Octane parameters. Now if you right click, we can also change from smooth to shade flat, and this is possible again also in Blender. So this is things that we can usually do already in Blender, but we can also work with the smooth effects also using the Octane properties. So another thing we can do actually is transform anything into an infinite plane. So if you select the cube, click on infinite plane, that's going to become an infinite plane, and it's going to be more interesting for this example right here. And I want to change now the environment again to have more like kind of a sense of an interior more than of an exterior, or like a really big hangar or big room. I want to have like more the feeling of a small room with just this really low light, red because Octane and Otoy is has this color in the logo, so I'm just getting inspired for this red light, but we're gonna we use more colors later. Now, if I select the monkey head and go into the modifiers where we apply the subdivision, if I delete the subdivision, we can see now that the monkey head looks less smooth and more edgy, more flat. So even if I smooth using the right click, and if I change it from flat to smooth, I can still see some edges, some edginess, some you know faces. So I can do the exact same effect also with the octane properties. And remember that this is a fake effect. It's an illusion. So if I use here the open subdiv parameter, you can see we already have Catmull Clark also here, and we can increase the subdivisions level. So it's gonna have the same effect as what we do in Blender, but we're gonna see the effect only in the render window, and we see the actual object in the other windows. So if I do wireframe, I can see the actual structure. If I use the shading, the simple shading, I can see the faces, but in the rendering, it's gonna look good and smooth and with a lot of subdivision. So this is one way you can increase the quality of, like, especially of curvy objects, but without increasing the number of polygons. So I can also, again, click on the show Octane viewport to see the actual rendering. Now, when we work with the viewport, actually we have a lot of heads-up display and text and gizmos and things right there. So I'm gonna show you how to get rid of those. But also, let's see something important. Talking about lighting, we start to see some shadows, and we start to see what is called the noise effect. Now, that noise is actually something we need to get rid of. It's something that is not really good for the quality of the rendering. And if we zoom a lot, we start to see the pixels, because rendering are made of pixels. So to increase the quality of our rendering, you need to increase the resolution, so the number of pixels, but also you need to decrease the visibility of the noise. And that's what we're gonna try to do in the lessons dedicated to the rendering. Now, if I go in the view here, I can start with the parameters to deactivate the grid, the floor grid, the axis, and all these different heads-up display that if I don't need it, I can just turn them off. I can use them in another viewport, perhaps like a more technical viewport like the one that we have on the right with the wireframe. And I'm gonna clean out everything here. And I can also deactivate the sphere, the navigation sphere, the sphere tools, and also the transforming tools that I am on the left, on the right, but we're gonna keep it for now. This is just a better view than before, and it's way more closer to the final rendering. Now let's start to bring some other objects into our scene. So the more objects we're gonna import, and also of course the better the materials, the better the lighting, the more beautiful will be your final render. So we need to go through all these different steps. So let's finish to talk about the importing of the 3D models. So right now I'm importing from SketchUp. I found this really beautiful armchair, kind of a baroque armchair. So we can work with the furnishing and people, something that it's more for an interior. We can see that here on the information, this is an FBX, so it's another format that we didn't try yet. So we're gonna try with FBX, we're gonna try with GLTF, we're gonna try with Blender, and we're getting all CC0, so public domain stuff. And here, this is another website. It's called renderpeople.com, and I'm gonna place the link in the description. And here you have pose people, so static people or animated people. But we're gonna talk about animation at the end of the course. But it's essentially what we can already do in Blender. And we also have rigged people ready to be animated. So in this case, I'm just gonna download the 3D pose people right here. So click on the free download, and in this case I'm gonna go for Blender because we are using Blender, so no need to use other software like Maya, 3D Studio Max, Rhino, Cinema 4D, and so on. And by the way, you will find video courses and all this software in the channel. and also video guides about Sketchfab and Polyhaven and Render People. So Polyhaven, this is also an excellent choice to download some nice 3D models that you can see here. They have you have pictures showing you the structure, so you can already see if it's too heavy or not in terms of polygons, and also you have textures. So these are really important when you need to build up your material in Octane, something that we will do later on. We want to focus more on the basic settings here, and again we are focusing more on the lining parts than on the materials, and also we are focusing on the geometry, on the objects that we are importing. So up here on the right, we can select the file format, which is going to be Blender, the resolution of the texture, which is again in pixels. 2K is going to be okay, and then we can download in Blender format. Now, when you use Blender format, you don't need to import into Blender. You just need to copy and paste, which is way more easier than importing. But I'm going to show you like different examples, different situations. So we can see here in the Polyhaven folder, I've saved the zipped file. So first thing you need to do, remember that you need to extract everything. Otherwise, they will not be seen by Blender. So you need to extract first, and then usually you have a file in Blender. So you double click directly there. You don't need to care about anything else. And then you also have a folder for the textures to create the material. But if you use the standard Blender application, you can already see the material is applied. So we can see everything, the object, the materials, and everything else. But we're gonna lose the material as soon as we move into Blender Octane version, Octane edition. Now we can right click and copy the objects, selecting those from the object list or the outliner on the right, or we can just do the shortcut key Ctrl C, Ctrl V to copy and paste the objects or the object from an instance of Blender to the other. So here in this other version of Blender, I can just do Ctrl V or paste, and there is my table. So this is how easy it is to work with Blender files. And I think I'm gonna scale down the monkey to make it like more appropriate size for this scene that we are building. So you can see here we are trying to building up a scene, and you need to know how to work with the transform tools that you have here on the left. You need to know how to work in Blender essentially, so that you can manage your scene and your objects in terms of selection, transformation, um, object properties, and so on. So again, if you don't know too much about Blender, I definitely suggest you give a look to the Blender video course in the channel. Now you can see that with the light and with this other object, we can definitely see the shadows and how the light is affecting the scene and the table in terms of shadows. So we are also going to move around the light, and this time I'm going to use global axis, so not local, so not on the normal on that object. And you can see that as soon as I move the light, I'm going to have a different effect also in terms of shadows. And you can see shadows right now are pretty blurred, they're not so sharp, but we're going to talk more about that later, how to manage lights and shadows. Now let's continue with the import. I'm going to try to import FBX from Sketchfab, so the armchair or Baroque armchair. And again, click on import FBX. If it doesn't work, work with the GLTF, which we saw in the previous video. Now give it some time, because the heavier is the object, the more time it will need to be imported. And this is also too big, so I'm gonna scale it. So again, you can see how much is important to know Blender and how you can move around. So I'm just gonna show you here the basics on how you can import and place the objects. Now if you go in the menus up there, you can select, you can change the view, you can also do frame selected. That's going to frame the view on the selected object. So you can see that I mainly work with the right side viewport, leaving the point of view of the camera on the left side untouched. But we have some issue there. I cannot see anything right now. We need to fix that. Now that is because the render engine has changed, so I need to make it Octane again. Now we can see that this object here is composed by many pieces. So to be sure, you can also select the entire hierarchy in order to make sure that you are selecting everything. And we can now change directly the position using the X, Epsilon, and Z in the transform tool on the right. So that's going to go directly in the origin. And we can now, again, frame all. So if you want to see all the scene, or frame selected. These are two important navigation tools that will help you to find your way into your scene. Now, also, this spherical navigation tool is really handy, especially when we need to move in a side view or in a top view, because perspective can be deceiving. So try to work with the 2D views instead of working only with a 3D view. So right here, I'm just positioning, scaling, rotating objects using a combination of 3D views and 2D views. And we can see the texture again in the viewport, but we cannot see the rendering of the Octane material. This is because we are using Eevee. Let's switch back to Octane. And now we have Octane. So we lost the textures, we lost the materials, but we got the environment and the area light from Octane. Now I'm doing a final import, again, FBX of the render people file. You can use Blender format, but just to show you again an FBX import, I will select, and you can see there are two different resolution in terms of polygons, 30K or 100K. I've chosen here 100K just to show you that it's going to be more accurate. It's going to be heavier, but nothing scary. We can definitely manage it. So depending again on your graphic card, you can manage more or less polygons. And again, I'm going to move it around. Now, usually we have correct size from render people, so I think that the rest of the scene is oversized. I need to shrink or decrease the size of the rest of the scene here, like the chair, the table, the monkey head. Now, I usually work with real scale. So I don't want to create scenes that are bigger than reality or smaller than reality. So what I used to do is I select the cube, because the cube usually is 2 meters in Blender. So you can see there that the original cube is 2 meters. So the chair is like something like 3 meters right now. So it's too big. So I need to scale everything down. So I think the only correct size here is the one of the character of the woman. So I'm gonna scale everything else accordingly and move it again on the infinite floor that I created. Check if everything looks fine also on a side view, if it's not too high or too low, and I think that everything is fine right now. And we can start to check the beautiful shadows that we are creating that cannot be created, remember, using just the environment. So with this combination, we are starting to have a more interesting scene. We are starting to tell a story with the objects, with the lights, and later on also with the materials, and with more complex materials with more complex lights. So this will be all for this video. But before we leave, I want to show you some 2 extra tips for the light. But we're going to continue to talk about artificial and natural lights. But if you select here and you go again back into the nodes, so you can see that everything runs through the nodes. Now, if you go down, you can see we have visible on diffuse, visible on specular. Now, these are all management tools to manage the lights. So you can decide if you don't want the diffuse power of that light to work. So it's only going to be visible on the specular level of the scene. So it's only going to be visible on objects that have specular materials like metallic materials or glossy materials. Or else you can just work with diffuse and deactivate the specularity. So we are not working with the material right now. We are working with the capacity of the light to be displayed on a specular material. So again, these are like switches, or and also cast shadows. You can decide if that light is going to project shadows or not. But you can see that shadows is a really important um, parameter. So I think this will be enough for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe to stay updated for more lessons. And if you want to support us, if you want to thank us with a little support, you can do it by joining the channel as a supporter. And of course, don't forget to see the other courses and video guides in our channel. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.